Okay, Doug, now it's time to work on finding our hinge. I've got a couple of drills for us. The hinge is a pretty tough movement to get if you've never done it before. It's not the most intuitive movement, but it is a movement that will help us in the future because it will turn into part of the squat. It will turn into part of the lunge. What it's going to really teach us how to do is how to manage our hips and how to generate a lot of force in our hips. We define the hinge as being maximal hip flexion, so maximal lots of bend in the hip and minimal knee flexion. We're almost looking for our shins to stay vertical and having our feet rooted into the ground. So now that we get to the lower body, even if we think about the body as a whole, we have these really big engines in the bottom and within our hips. Our hips work a lot like our shoulders. Remember we talked a lot about that external rotation? Now we're going to do that within our hips as well. The reason why is the shoulder, like the hips, are what we call ball and socket joints. And if we can create that rotation, we're going to be able to create a lot of torque, which is going to produce power and stability. I want to teach you a drill that will help you recognize that to start out. So let's go ahead and start with our feet at neutral. And what I want you to go ahead and do is find your active plank, really root your feet into the ground, and think about tearing that paper for me. Okay, can you do that for me there? Great. So now I want you to think about that reference point, and I want you to open up to about 45-degree angles, and I want you to try to find that active plank and tear the paper again, thinking about your feet being on dinner plates, and you're trying to spin those plates, activating the glutes. And now we're going to go almost 90 degrees all the way into this kind of like sumo style position, and you're going to think about activating the glutes here, okay? So of those three, which one did you feel the strongest in?
I think the first one.
The first one. So what happens is we're able to generate a lot more torque in this position. So whenever we're starting or doing our hinge, depending on the exercise that we're doing, we want to be at about 0 degrees to about 12 degrees open, and that's going to kind of be our neutral depending on what's comfortable for you and depending on the modality or the piece of equipment that we're actually using. So just like we want to set the shoulder in a stable position in our push, our pull, and our rotate, we want to be able to set our hips in a stable position within the hinge, which will turn into the squat and the lunge. But that's what gets really important as we talk about the lower body, is generating a lot of stability within the hip complex itself. So I want you to think about that as we come into our next drills. So now that we can create that external rotation and stability within the pelvis itself, we found our active plank position. The next thing that we need to do is find our strong plank position. I like to actually trick your brain a little bit. We're going to use some visual imagery. I want you to pretend like you had to jump over a 20-foot ravine. Show me how you would have to load to get into that position. So go ahead and get ready to jump for me there. Good. So this is going to be a nice, powerful position that we're going to find here. Come back into this one for me here, but this time I want you to kind of slap your thighs as you come down, nice and explosive. Good. Give me one more. So when we're down here, what I want you to go ahead and do is put your hands right in between your hamstrings and your glutes, and I want you to go ahead and feel what that feels like. Go ahead and bring those hips up really, really high. You should feel those glutes kind of turn off where we get a little too hingy, and then go ahead and bring those hips really low where we get kind of squatty, and you should feel a lot of dominance into the glutes and those hamstrings kind of turn off. So let's come back and reset. So we're looking for about a 50-50 mix in the hamstrings and the glutes. That's going to generate a lot of power and a lot of force and put us in our strongest position. There's nothing wrong with training a super high hinge. There's nothing wrong with training a squat. But if we think about our daily life and what we want to be able to accomplish, we want to get you in the most powerful positions where you are efficient and you're generating a lot of force. And so by getting you into being able to jump, being explosive, that's where we're going to see a lot of activation and a good mix between generating power from the glutes and the hamstrings. Okay? So what we want to do is now we were able to use that imagery, we're able to do it in a ballistic fashion, very quick, very explosive. Now I want to see if you can get back to that pattern, but can we do it by controlling our motor control and doing it a lot slower and more controlled like we might do in a deadlift. So I want you to show me that. Can we get back to that position? So go ahead and root our feet into the ground, and then go ahead and come into our hinge, hang out there, and then let's test that through there. We're going to do our 3-point drill because we're still looking for all of that tension within the core. Turn those lats on by putting those shoulder blades into the back pocket for me. Come back up. And then we just want to really drill this in, and can we find that pattern? Breathing through, breathing at the top, and then come to the bottom and hold. Show me you can breathe through this position. Good. Last one. Great. That looks fantastic. Great. So that's the hinge. So we can use all of those drills, and we want to think about all of those things as we're working through the hinge. The hinge is pretty easy when we start to think about it and break it down into components. We're going from plank into our hinge. So hip extension into hip flexion. Hip extension into hip flexion. And we're maintaining that neutral spine. We're maintaining tension within the core itself, and that's going to help us generate a lot of power and a lot of stability within this pattern, as it will lead into other lower body dominant movements.